Hi, this is Chris and welcome to Phoenix Gaming. Today we're going to do general information 40K, your first tournament. Brief overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what it is you need to play in a tournament, uh, what format is it, and how will that dictate your rules for list creation, whether or not you need to worry about things being Wysiwyg and what that actually means, and what to do if you need a judge. Now, these aren't going to go in the same order as the overview. I tend to bounce around a little bit, as everybody knows. But what we are going to start with is what do I need? Well, you're going to need models to represent your army. Obviously, this is a miniature game, so you're going to need miniatures. They don't necessarily have to be painted. You do want to at least put some effort into getting them painted, but if this is your first tournament, they don't have to be painted. You're just going to not get some points. So it's one of those where rules is written, you get 10 extra points if your whole army's painted and based. You just don't get those points, but you'll still get to play, and that's what's important. You're going to need a tape measure, you're going to need dice, you're going to need objective markers. So I came from being a TO as my background and then playing in tournaments. So I didn't realize that I would need objective markers because I always provided them to the players who came to my tournaments. All my tables had objective markers on them. So I didn't realize that I had to bring my own until I went to a tournament outside of my store and didn't have them and was just like, "Oh, I guess this is a thing." So make sure you've got objective markers. They can be 40 millimeter bases. They can be the big expensive neoprene ones. It doesn't matter. But just make sure you've got some with you just in case your opponent doesn't have some with them. You're going to want a printout of your army list. I would use BattleScribe to create your army list and print it out. You only need one copy. You don't have to give it to your opponent to keep, but you do want to have one on hand just so you can give the opponent one to look over if they want to. Obviously you just take that back after the round. You need an account with BCP or Best Coast Pairings for most tournaments. It's just a tournament organization app that uses ITC points and all this other stuff. I'll put a link in the description to the website. You're going to want to download the app. You'll want to register for an account. And then every tournament that uses Best Coast Pairings will populate when you search for those tournaments. And it doesn't just do 40K. You can do Age of Sigmar and various other games with it. So you can download that app. You can look at all the tournaments going on in a specific day. I believe you can search by location even. So there's a lot of options there so you can find different events near you. Uh, Entry fees, different tournaments are going to have a different amount of entry fees. So like one might be $5, but one might be 30. It just depends on the format and the TO and the location and a whole other list of things. A positive and great attitude, that goes without saying. Officials, rule sources like your codex and stuff like that, snacks and water. Now, we're not going to go through all of these like line by line, but we are going to go through some of these in a little bit more detail. Again, Best Coast Pairings, you get the players app because there's players and there's TOs. You get the player app, you register for the tournament through the app. All your standings and tournament information is going to be found in the app. So when you go to a tournament, if they use Best Coast Pairings, which like I said, most of them will, you'll register through the app. The TO will organize everything. They'll start rounds. You can just look at the app and it'll tell you what table you're on. You go to that table, it'll tell you who you're playing. You talk to your opponent, it'll tell you what army they're playing. It's just a good thing to use. So just go ahead and download it if you think you're going to do a tournament, just so you have it. And again, all the standings and stuff are found in the app. So like at the end of the tournament, you can look at your placings and see how you did compared to everybody else. Your official rule sources, like I said, you're going to need a codex with all applicable FAQs and erratas printed out if you use hard books. So you can't just show up with a codex and think you're fine. You're going to need your errata and your FAQs because you've got to have hard copies of everything if you're using hard copies. Any supplemental books that you plan on using. So if you're using like an Army of Renown, if you're using an Army of Renown, you need the relevant book that it was published in also. And it has to be the official Games Workshop book, and you have to have the official Games Workshop FAQs. And the reason is because sometimes Battle Scribe's not right, so you got to make sure you have the official stuff so that you can show people the official stuff. You can use the Warhammer 40K app, the official one from Games Workshop. I've never run into an issue with a tournament organizer not allowing it. And as a TO, I've honestly really not had any issues with the rules being incorrect. I mean, it does happen on occasion, but it's generally like stupid stuff. Like at one point, the broadside battlesuits had the fly keyword. Now I know they don't have the fly keyword, and every Tau player I know knows they don't have the fly keyword. So at the end of the day, it's usually big issues like that where it's like, this is silly and we know that's not what it's supposed to be, so we can just move on. It is typically up to date with FAQs and points relatively quickly. So if you're doing rules reference, the Games Workshop app is phenomenal. If you're doing list building, just use Battlescribe. If you don't have any of your official rule sources, generally speaking, the policy for most tournaments or tournament organizers is that you will lose any and or all rules disputes, which effectively means you're going to get to play, but you're going to lose every game. Because as soon as somebody says, show me how that rule interacts because I think it does this, if you don't have an official rule source, they're automatically right. It's just best practices to make sure you have your books. You know, and a good example of that would be like, let's say I'm going to use an orc strat. Let's say I'm going to use ramming speed. It's 2 command points. When you charge, you roll 3 dice, and then after you complete a successful charge on a 2-up, you do D3 mortal wounds, and it's only usable on vehicles. So let's say I don't have my Orc Codex and I don't have the Warhammer 40K app or any official rule source with that stratagem. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna bring my my Death Dread out of the teleporter. It comes in from Deep Strike. I'm gonna spend 2 CP. We're gonna ramming speed it. Here's what it does. If my opponent says, you know, I think it's you roll 3, but you pick the 2 highest. Can you show me that? If I don't have an official rule source, that means that's exactly what it does. It no longer just rolls 3 dice. It rolls 3 and I get the 2 highest. So you need to make sure you have your rules with you. It was something I had learned early on at one of my tournaments. Somebody didn't have their rules with them. I didn't have an official policy in place. It created a point of contention between him and his opponent. And unfortunately, you know, it's one of those where it seems like a no-brainer, but you got to make sure you have it. You can't just use Battlescribe. You got to have the official rules, because this was a situation in which Battlescribe had the rule wrong also. Tournament format and list rules. So most tournaments are going to run the standard missions in the 2K format of whatever the current season is. So that means right now they're going to just run whatever the Strike Force missions are out of the Nephilim packet. There are some different off-meta tournaments, and they vary in format. One of my favorites is Highlander. You only get to bring one instance of each datasheet except for troops and dedicated transports. Now, there is some caveats to that, but that's effectively how it works. And it's really neat because you get to see a lot of cool armies and lists that you wouldn't normally see. We had a guy bring 2 Stampas because one was technically a custom Stampa, which is a different data sheet, and one of them was a regular Stampa. Uh, and coincidentally, that was my one loss at that Highlander tournament, was the 2 Stampas. Uh, and my list was like 90 Berserkers or something along those lines. Like, it was also just equally silly because Berserkers are troops and World Eaters. So I do like Highlander, and I like some of the off-meta formats. You can also have tournaments that will have less or more than the standard 2,000 points. So when you're looking at a tournament, these are things to look for. Is there a specific format? What missions are they running? Is it more or less than 2,000 points? Is it a team event? So there's different team events. ATC and WTC are different types of team events. ATCs are a lot of fun. You get, typically it's 5 players, but a lot of times you'll see 4 also. You'll get 5 players on a team, and then you just kind of like there's a basically a mini game where you try to force specific matchups. So if you play and I play and we both have a 5-person team, we're trying to force specific matchups between my team and your team, and it's really neat. It's a lot of fun. Doubles is another tournament format. Doubles is pretty cool because it's each player is bringing, typically it's 1,000 points, and then you just play as if your 2,000 points were one army. Again, there's caveats to that, but it's 2 players on the board at the same time per team. So you'll actually have 4 players playing one game. So you need to make sure you know what your format is before you register and make sure that you are ready for that format. In addition, you're going to notice that some tournaments have an RTT or GT tag. RTT is a Rogue Trader tournament, and that's really just a way of saying it's a smaller event. It's typically 15 tables or fewer, and they are done in a single day. That's really all it means. A GT is typically 2 or more days, and it has more than 15 tables also usually. You want to make sure you bring plenty of snacks and water. It's typically 3 hours per round, and generally speaking, you're only getting one meal break, and they're usually 3 rounds. So you're going to be playing Warhammer for about 9 to 10 hours in a single day with some small breaks and one lunch break. So you want to stay hydrated. You're going to be standing for hours at a time. So being hydrated is going to help you play better. I see a lot of guys bringing sodas and stuff, and that's fine. If that's what you want, I'm not going to tell you that you're a bad person for it. But my suggestion is to bring water or some kind of sports drink, and I wouldn't even do Gatorade, at least not en masse, like maybe a bottle of Gatorade. You don't want all the sugar, but just having the extra fluids will help you. It'll help you be able to focus better. It'll help you be able to play better. It'll help you stand longer. Um, you know, Also, I tend to recommend healthy snacks like we did when we went to Adepticon, which was a massive tournament. It was 2 days, or maybe it was three. I don't remember. It was 2 days. It was Saturday and Sunday. We did the weekend team tournament. Uh, I boxed up and bagged up a bunch of protein bars. You know, there's going to be junk food everywhere. You're going to probably have a cookie, depending on where it's at. You might even end up having a beer at some point, and that's all fine. But you want to make sure you're also putting some healthy things in your body. It will help you. The protein bars are going to help you kind of feel full for a little bit longer, give you some more nutrients that your body needs. So, things like that are things you want to think about. You don't want candy bars all day long. It's going to make you feel like crap. You're not going to be able to stand as long, and you're going to be reaching for them more frequently because of the insulin spike that the extra sugar causes. So you want something like a protein bar. If you do a fruit, that's fine. They've got some fiber to help mitigate the sugar spikes and stuff. But just healthy snacks. Also remember that caffeine dehydrates you. If you drink coffee or energy drinks, which I do, I drink both. I like coffee. I love cold brew. Uh, you know, and energy drinks I also like. Bring extra water and just be prepared to pee more. Caffeine is a weird drug. It's a diuretic to a certain extent, so it will cause you to urinate more frequently. And then as you drink more water, you're going to urinate more frequently. So just understand that, if you're not used to this amount of fluids and you're like not typically a hydrated person, you're going to be peeing a lot. So just be prepared for that. Wysiwyg, so that's what that means is what you see is what you get. It's just an acronym. That's all. It's going to vary by tournament, and what it means is models are equipped with whatever loadouts you have in your lists. So if you have a sergeant and that sergeant is listed with a chainsword and pistol, it should be modeled with that. Like I said, it's going to vary by tournaments, and by TOs. Most large GT-sized events are pretty strict with it. You're going to have to model your units Wysiwyg. And that's just so we don't have a bunch of weird proxies going on. Like you don't play one guy with guard and all his plasma guns are actually melta guns, and then you play another guy with guard where all his melta guns are actually flamethrowers. It just saves some confusion. Smaller tournaments, you can kind of get away with some proxies or substitutions a little bit more as long as everything is clear and concise and easy to define. And what I mean is just like in the following example. Like I've got 40 guardsmen, but I don't have any of them with a melta gun. But I'm not using any plasma guns, so I want to count my plasma guns as melta guns. Really what you should do in that event is you should just message the TO, let them know the situation, let them know exactly what's going on, and see if it's okay. If they come back with a no, don't be upset. Just run the plasma guns or whatever. If they come back with a yes, then you need to make sure you have that discussion with your opponent very thoroughly every time you play a game. So these are just things to think about. Again, usually a lot of tournaments you're going to run into, generally most armies are fairly Wysiwyg, and there's not a lot of room for interpretation or confusion. Obviously, as 3D printing gets bigger, that's also going to be a thing. But again, any 3D printed models typically have to be cleared by the tournament organizer before they can be put on the table. Attitude, man, make sure you have a great attitude. Be prepared to lose a lot. If this is your first tournament, you're probably getting hammered every game, and that's okay. As anybody who has played this game before knows, you lose a lot of games before you win. And that's just how this game works. So take it graciously. Thank your opponent for playing. Thank your opponent for being friendly. Just have fun. That's the main thing. If you don't lose, then you're surprised and you're happy. But if you go into it just thinking, this is my first tournament, I'm probably going to lose every game, that is okay. Honestly, man, like the best games are when you're at the end of the day, especially if you're not playing for top table and you're just rolling dice and having fun. And that's how you end up meeting new people. The community is large, but the tournament community is much smaller. And what I mean by that is like I've gone to different events. I've been to Adepticon, which was big, massive, and I didn't play people I knew at Adepticon, but I ran into a lot of people I knew at Adepticon. We played in an RTT over on the Wisconsin-Illinois border. And again, I personally didn't play anybody I knew, but some of the guys in my group ended up playing other people that we all knew. So you're going to run into people over and over and over. And so if you're a salty, shitty human, people are going to remember that and they're not going to want to play you. And that's just how it is. Now, I'm not saying you got to pretend to be nice and happy all the time. But man, like, just don't be an ass. Like, everybody gets upset. It's a game. We're playing competitively. We're competitive humans if we're playing at tournaments. But just try to be polite and cordial at all times. I'm not going to get into too much detail, but I did end up playing at an event. It was a multiple day event, and I had to play against this dude who was just a salty, salty pirate. Like, was just bad attitude the whole time. Everybody else on his team, phenomenal. I ended up having to play him, and it just left a bad taste in my mouth to the point where if I have to play him at another event, if I'm the person that has to play him, I'm just going to walk away from the table because I want to, at the end of the day, I still want to have fun. Like if I have to spend 3 hours with you at a game table, I want us to be able to interact and have fun, you know? And that's the main thing. Like at the end of the day, it's still a game. Nobody is playing for money, so we can all just calm down and have some fun. Yes, it's more fun to win, but take losing graciously. And that's all I'm trying to say. People will remember your bad attitudes. If you need a ruling or have a question, your opponent should never deny you showing a rule. So again, let's go back to ramming speed. If I tell my opponent I'm going to use ramming speed and this is what I'm doing and this is how it works, if my opponent says, hey man, can I see that? My answer is always absolutely. Give me 1 second and I'll pull it up for you. I play fast because I've played a lot. So I need people to stop me and slow me down if they need things, just because I kind of go quickly. So, and again, a good example of that is I played in a tournament where I played this gentleman named Matt, super nice guy. Uh, I got to go first, and I started off by dumping my boys out of a truck. The jumping my tank busters, dump my tank busters out of a truck, to jump them, used more DACA, and then blew one of his plague burst crawlers off the board turn one. And he like I play fast, so he said, "Hey man, can you please walk me through what just happened and why it interacted that way?" Absolutely, dude. Here's the spell, here's the strat, here's the rule on tank busters. Let's walk through it. Now you understand. And it was good. And that's it, man. He just said, "Can I please see this?" They should never deny that. They should always just say, "Yeah, sure." If you still are unsure about the rule and how it interacts, or feel like it interacts differently, it's okay. We can call a judge. Just be polite. And again, I played at the Wisconsin tournament, and and honestly, like most of the time, we resolve things without a judge. Because usually, whether I'm right or wrong, I'll just defer to whatever my opponent wants. And a good example, like we were playing at that tournament in Wisconsin, and a gentleman was kind of piling in and making attacks in a weird way. And I said, I honestly don't know if this is how this works. I would need to look it up. And he was like, okay, and he told me, my understanding is this is how it works. And I said, perfect. We're going to do it this way. It's not really going to affect too much, but I would like to look it up while you're doing your thing. So just tell me what I need to roll and I'll do it. But if you need a judge, just be polite. And a good example in that situation is if I would have looked at him and said, hey, I do believe you. I just would like a judge to kind of come over and let me know also, because I've not seen this interaction and I kind of want to see it, from a judge's mouth. And that's it, man. You just got to do it in a nice way. Hey, I think this interacts in a different way. I would like a judge for clarification. I apologize for stopping the game. That's it. That's too easy. Just remember that, if this is one of your first tournaments, you're new. And most people will understand that. And in my experience, the community is awesome and they're willing to help new players. And most people are really patient. If you go up and you just tell somebody, hey, man, this is my first tournament, this is going to be a little bit slower game. Cool, man. Like, and from my perspective, if you tell me that, awesome. Like, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to go slower. We're going to walk through things. I'll answer whatever questions you need. Now, if you disagree or the judge ruled wrong, and I have a few examples of this on both sides, once where I was wrong, once where I was right, don't argue. Don't argue with the judge. If the judge says this is what happens, then that's what happens. You just accept it and you move on with your life. Arguing with the judge slows the game down. If you're at a bigger tournament, it can get you kicked out of the game. And that's not because judges are on power trips and they just want to flex their muscles. It's because they also need to be taking care of different tables and they don't have time to sit there and argue with you. At the end of the day, we are human. We do make mistakes. I've made a couple. And we're going to go over that in a minute. Approach the TO after the game and show them the interaction, and most of them will apologize. Now, they can't change their judgment, obviously, but it does help us moving forward. It helps us make sure we get those interactions correctly. 40K is a big game with a lot of rules. This helps us moving forward. So a good example, I have a gentleman asked about multiple models controlling objectives that were in the same unit. So you have two models in the same unit. Can they both control different objectives? My understanding was no, and that's just because I hadn't done a deep dive in the rule. I misunderstood. I didn't misinterpret. I misread the rule. He was like, okay, perfect. And then after their game, he came up to me and he was like, hey, Chris, I just wanted to let you know I'm not trying to be rude or mean. Here's how the rule actually interacts, just so you know moving forward. That is the 100% proper way to do it. I messed up. He let me know. He accepted my judgment right there at the table, moved on with the game. And that is 100% the correct way to do it. Like I said, arguing with the judge will only do a handful of things. If you're rude and belligerent, the judge will start probably subconsciously just kind of ruling against you any other time you need a judge. And again, that's just because we're human. We're not going to go out and be malicious, most of us, but there's going to be a part of our brain that's going to be like, this guy is argumentative, this guy is rude, this guy is mean, and he's probably wrong. So just remember that we're human, we're running a tournament, we're doing a lot of things, we can't get everything right. If the ruling is wrong, just accept the ruling and then approach the judge afterward. I promise you it will make your tournament experience that much better. This is a little bit longer than I intended for it to be, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up here. I hope this helps all of you beginners and helps you kind of prepare for your first tournaments. As usual, our Patreon tiers, hatchlings, $1.50. You get a mention on the Patreon's page, which would be at the end of videos. Firebirds, $5. You get 24-hour early access to all content and ability to vote on future content, in addition to mentioning on the Firebirds page. And then we've got a new tier, Phoenix. It's $10. You're going to get Hatchling and Firebird, and then you'll also get a sticker. I'll reach out to you once you do it, and I'll ship you a sticker. They're super nice. It's one of my birds. And then the Immortal, you get everything above. And you'll also get a super cool Phoenix Gaming shirt sent to you and a special shout out at the end of the video. So not only will you go on a page, you'll get a special shout out. And we're going to actually move over to our Immortals right now. MILF Slayer 69, also known as Captain Too Tall, and then the real Donnie G. Right now, you guys are my MVPs. I appreciate your support. Thanks for watching. You can find me on Twitter, Patreon. All the links are in the description. And then I've got my Teespring store. You can find that link in the description. And then we'll have the Best Coast Pairings link in the description as well. You guys have an awesome, awesome day, and hopefully I'll see some of you at some tournaments here in the future.